The security guard's hand moved toward his radio when Hannah Brooks pushed through the revolving doors of Monroe Financial. October wind followed her inside, rattling the marble lobby like old bones. She didn't belong here, not in her patched coat, not with her thrift store shoes clicking against floors worth more than her grandmother's yearly rent. But the yellowed envelope in her pocket held dynamite. 15 years ago, Charles Monroe stood over her parents' graves, his hand on 4-year-old Hannah's shoulder, promising to protect her. Instead, he built an empire on her inheritance, condemning her to food stamps while he dined at the Four Seasons. Today was her 21st birthday. Today, the legal chains fell away. Upstairs, Charles Monroe raised champagne to celebrate another billion-dollar merger, unaware that in 3 hours, the daughter he'd buried in paperwork and lies would resurrect herself in his boardroom. The ghost of William Brooks was coming to collect. Before we continue, please leave a like and let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. Hannah Elizabeth Brooks had her father's sharp mind trapped in poverty's cage. At 21, she worked 3 jobs morning shift at a Brooklyn diner, afternoons tutoring kids who still had hope, nights cleaning the very offices her father once owned. Every paycheck went to keeping her grandmother alive, keeping the lights on, keeping the illusion that tomorrow might be different. She still wore her mother's coat, navy wool, patched at the elbows where Sarah Brooks had worn it thin writing in coffee shops, dreaming of novels she'd never publish. The coat was all Hannah had left of the woman who died when she was 4, that and eyes the same shade of autumn brown. Charles Theodore Monroe lived 40 floors above the city's conscience. At 58, his silver hair and Armani suits told a story of self-made success that everyone believed because he'd told it so many times he almost believed it himself. The truth lived in a locked drawer in his home office documents with William Brooks' signature. Partnership agreements that proved every dollar of Monroe Financial's seed money came from the Brooks Family Trust. The lie had been easy at first. William and Sarah were dead. Their daughter was 4 years old. Who would question a grieving business partner taking control of assets to protect them for the child's future? Dorothy Mae Brooks knew the truth, but kept it locked behind her dentures and dignity. 75 years old, hands gnarled from scrubbing floors that Charles Monroe walked across in $1,000 shoes, she'd raised Hannah on food stamps and fairy tales. Not once had she mentioned the millions that should have been theirs. She'd made a calculation better, her granddaughter grow up poor and pure than rich and poisoned by revenge. James Patterson had discovered the truth 3 years ago while digitizing old files. The company lawyer, 62 and counting days to retirement, found William Brooks's real will sealed in red wax, hidden beneath layers of false documentation. His conscience wouldn't let him sleep. 3 months ago, on Hannah's 18th birthday, he'd mailed her an anonymous package. No explanation, just photocopies and a single line, "Your inheritance awaits. Rebecca Monroe, 19 and fighting leukemia with her father's stubborn pride, believed her father hung the moon. She didn't know the moon was stolen, that its light came from a dead man's dreams. The stage was set. Manhattan's gleaming towers versus Brooklyn's crumbling brownstones, truth versus lies, justice versus mercy. The receptionist's smile froze when Hannah approached the marble desk. Everything about the girl screamed wrong, from her frayed coat to her scuffed shoes that squeaked against the pristine floor. "I need to see Charles Monroe. Do you have an appointment?" The receptionist's fingers didn't even move toward the keyboard. "Tell him it's about the Brooks Foundation." The name hit like a slap. The receptionist's eyes widened. That name hadn't been spoken in these halls for 15 years. It was the kind of corporate ghost story that got whispered at holiday parties after too much wine. She grabbed the phone. 40 floors up, Charles Monroe stood before a room of Japanese investors, laser pointer painting dreams across profit projections. "As you can see, our third quarter exceeded." His assistant, Margaret, slipped through the door. Her face was white. She never interrupted presentations. Charles's hand tightened on the pointer as she whispered in his ear, "Someone claiming to be Brooks's daughter is in the lobby." The champagne flute in Charles's other hand cracked, not shattered, just a hairline fracture running from rim to stem. The investors murmured. Blood beaded on his palm where crystal met flesh. "Gentlemen, if you'll excuse me for just a moment." William's face flooded his mind. That last day in the hospital, machines beeping, William's hand cold in his. "Take care of Hannah, Charlie. Promise me. She's all that's left of us." "I promise. Will. I promise." The promise had lasted exactly 3 months. 3 months before Charles saw the numbers in the Brooks Trust, $47 million. William had never mentioned the family money. Old railroad fortunes from Sarah's side. Charles had been surviving on credit cards and bravado. The temptation writhed like a living thing. Hannah stood in the lobby, studying the wall of success photographs of Monroe Financial's victories. Her father's face appeared in none of them, erased like Stalin's enemies from Soviet photographs. The security guard hovered nearby, hand on his radio, waiting for the word to escort her out. "Miss Brooks." Margaret appeared, professional smile not reaching her eyes. "Mr. Monroe will see you." The elevator rose through layers of privilege. 3rd floor accounting, cubicles and coffee-stained carpets. 10th floor middle management, actual offices with doors. 20th senior partners, mahogany and leather. 40th, the kingdom. Charles built on a dead man's gold. Each floor, eyes followed her, the patched coat like a neon sign. "I don't belong." She heard her grandmother's voice, yesterday's goodbye. "Dignity isn't what you wear, baby. It's how you carry yourself." Your father knew that. Even when we had nothing, he walked like a king. Charles waited in his office, back to the door, staring at the city below. He'd prepared for this moment in nightmares, but nightmares hadn't prepared him for the footsteps Sarah's light tread and William's determined stride. "Mr. Monroe." He turned. The world tilted. Hannah had William's eyes, exact shade of gray-green, same gold flecks when the light caught them. Eyes that had trusted him with everything. Eyes that had closed believing his daughter was safe. "You look just like—" The words choked him. "My father. I know." Hannah stood perfectly still, not aggressive, not defensive, waiting, like William used to wait in negotiations, letting silence do the work. Charles's prepared dismissal, some story about an imposter, security protocols, demanding proof crumbled. This was William's daughter. Every gesture, every angle of her face screamed Brooks DNA. "Why are you here?" Hannah reached into her coat pocket. Charles flinched, afraid of what, a gun, a lawsuit. But she pulled out only an envelope, yellow with age. "Today's my 21st birthday. Legal age to claim what's mine." She set the envelope on his desk, between the pictures of Rebecca and the champagne from this morning's celebration. "My father trusted you with everything. My mother's family fortune. My future. Me." The air conditioner hummed. Somewhere. A printer whirred. Normal office sounds that seemed obscene against the weight of history in the room. "You were 4 years old," Charles said quietly. "At the funeral, you wore a black dress with white flowers. You asked me why Daddy was sleeping in a box. And you said he was tired from taking care of everyone." Hannah's voice stayed level. "Then you promised to take care of me for him." The crack in the champagne glass spread, a spiderweb of inevitable collapse. Just like the crack in Charles Monroe's carefully constructed life, spreading from a promise broken 15 years ago. "So, Mr. Monroe," Hannah said, "let's talk about how you took care of me." The boardroom doors were mahogany, thick enough to muffle secrets. Charles pushed through them at 2:58 p.m., expecting to find his board waiting patiently for their king. Instead, he found Hannah Brooks sitting in his chair. "Security." Charles's voice cracked like a whip. 2 guards appeared instantly. "Remove this woman." Hannah didn't move. "The quarterly review is scheduled for 3 p.m. Conference room 42A. You'll be discussing the Morrison acquisition and the projected 4th quarter earnings of 12%. She pulled out a worn notebook. You'll also be voting on the executive bonus structure. Yours is set at 4.7 million. The board members froze. That information was confidential, distributed only this morning via encrypted emails. Charles's face went from red to purple. I don't know how you got that information, but corporate espionage is a federal crime. It's not espionage when you own the company. Hannah stood, moved to a regular chair. Please, Mr. Monroe, take your seat. Let's begin the meeting. James Patterson entered through the side door, arms full of legal folders. He stopped mid-stride when he saw Hannah. The folders trembled in his grip. Brooks. Hannah Brooks. Yes, Mr. Patterson. The old lawyer's face drained of color. He set the folders down with exaggerated care, as if they contained nitroglycerin. Gentlemen, we need to pause this meeting. Patterson, what the hell are you doing? Charles snarled. But James was already at the wall safe, spinning the combination with shaking fingers. The other board members, Morrison, Chen, Villanueva, and Richardson exchanged worried glances. They'd never seen Patterson rattled. The man had weathered SEC investigations without breaking a sweat. There's a document, James muttered, pulling out a metal box that hadn't been opened in 15 years. Sealed document, red wax, Brooks family crest. Charles's hand slammed on the table. That's enough. Miss Brooks, or whatever your real name is, you're leaving. Now. He turned to the board. This is obviously some sort of shakedown. Look at her straight from the welfare office. Hannah stood slowly. The patch on her coat caught the light. This coat belonged to my mother. She wore it the day she met my father. She was wearing it when she died. Her voice never rose, but each word cut clean. This coat has been through 20 New York winters because I couldn't afford another one. While you spent $4,000 on that suit, I've been wearing dead women's clothes and dead men's dreams. Exactly my point, Charles sneered. Look at you. Brooklyn trash playing dress-up in Manhattan. Your grandmother scrubs floors for a living. You smell like the grease from whatever diner you crawled out of this morning. You think because you share DNA with William Brooks that you deserve something. Morrison shifted uncomfortably. Charles, perhaps we should... What? Listen to this gold digger's sob story. Charles laughed, ugly and sharp. William Brooks was a dreamer who got lucky marrying into old money. His daughter is nothing but a failed legacy looking for a handout. The wax seal broke with a sound like a bone snapping. James Patterson's hands shook as he unfolded the will. 15 years of hiding in the dark had yellowed the paper, but the ink remained sharp, clear. William Brooks's signature. Sarah Brooks's signature. Witnessed. Notarized. Legal. Hannah Eloise Brooks. James read, his voice hollow. Sole beneficiary of the Brooks family trust, including... He had to stop, clear his throat. Including 67% ownership of Brooks Monroe Financial, to be held in trust until her 21st birthday. The boardroom became a tomb. Chen spoke first. 67%. William was the primary investor. James continued. The initial capital, the Series A funding, the expansion investments, all Brooks family money. Charles Monroe's contribution was... He scanned the document. 15% cash investment and operational management. Richardson, the CFO, was already doing math on his phone. That means... Christ. That means she owns controlling interest. Has owned it since the day my parents died, Hannah said quietly. When Mr. Monroe became executor of their estate. When he filed papers stating no will was found. When he liquidated the trust for the child's benefit and absorbed it into Monroe Financial. Charles stood so fast his chair toppled. That's a lie. William made me equal partner. We built this together. You built it on my inheritance. Hannah pulled out a folder, copies of bank records, transfer documents, each one showing Brooks trust funds moving into Monroe Financial accounts. $47 million. That's what my family's money was worth when you stole it. Do you know what it's worth now? After 15 years of compound interest and market growth, Villanueva whistled low. North of 300 million. 327 million, Hannah corrected. I've had 3 years to do the math. 3 years since Mr. Patterson sent me these documents. Every head swiveled to James. The lawyer stood straighter. My conscience wouldn't let me retire knowing what I knew. The will was hidden in a subfolder, misfiled as a property deed. When I found it, I could have stayed quiet, could have protected my pension, my reputation. He looked at Charles. But I kept thinking about that little girl at the funeral, the one you promised to protect. Charles's carefully constructed world shattered like the champagne glass still sitting on his desk. The board members were already shifting. That subtle reorganization of power that happens when kings fall. Morrison moved his chair slightly toward Hannah. Chen started reviewing documents with new eyes. Richardson began texting lawyers. Probably. Or maybe reporters. This is impossible, Charles whispered. But even he could hear the lie in it. The statute of limitations doesn't apply to fraud involving minors, James said. You know that, Charles. You counted on no one ever looking, on Hannah never knowing what she'd lost. Hannah stood. She moved to the window, looking out at the city her father had dreamed of conquering with kindness instead of greed. My father trusted you. My mother trusted you. I was 4 years old, and I trusted you when you held my hand at their funeral. The room waited. Charles waited. $300 million and 15 years of lies waited. Hannah turned back to face them. Mr. Monroe, you asked why I'm here. I'm here because today I'm 21. Today, I can legally claim what my father left me. Today, you have to look me in the eye and explain what you did with the little girl you promised to protect. The security guards still stood by the door, but now they seemed unsure who they were supposed to remove. The board members were silent, watching the king they'd served realize his throne was built on stolen bones. You know what the funny thing is, Hannah said, returning to her seat, not Charles's seat, just a regular chair at the table. I didn't come here for revenge. I came here because I wanted to believe there was an explanation, that maybe you invested the money for me, that maybe it's been sitting in an account, waiting, that maybe you kept your promise in some way I didn't understand. She looked at Charles, and for a moment, everyone in the room saw William Brooks's ghost sitting in his daughter's eyes, hopeful despite evidence, believing in people despite their failures. So tell me, Mr. Monroe, tell everyone, what did you do with the money you were supposed to protect for me? Where did my father's dream go? Where did my mother's family fortune end up? And while my grandmother cleaned your floors for minimum wage, while I worked 3 jobs to pay for her medicine, while I ate ramen noodles for dinner every night for 21 years, where was the protection you promised? Charles Monroe, master of the universe, builder of empires, destroyer of dreams, had nothing to say. The will lay on the table between them, yellow as old bones, legal as death, final as the promise he'd broken to a dying man. The board meeting was supposed to discuss quarterly profits. Instead, it became Charles Monroe's trial, with Hannah Brooks as judge, jury, and the owner of everything he thought was his. Hannah climbed the 5 flights to their Brooklyn apartment, each step echoing in the stairwell that hadn't been painted since the 90s. The familiar smell of Mrs. Chen's cooking from 3B mixed with the musty carpeting. She found Dorothy in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had gone cold hours ago. You knew. Hannah didn't phrase it as a question. Dorothy's shoulders sagged. Sit down, baby. You knew for 15 years, while we used food stamps, while you worked until your hands bled, while I dropped out of college because we couldn't afford it. You knew. I knew. Dorothy's voice was steady, but tears tracked down the creases of her face. Your father told me everything before he died. The trust, the company shares, all of it. He made me promise to raise you right. Hannah. Not rich. Right. How could you watch you struggle? Dorothy laughed, bitter as the coffee they could rarely afford. You think that was easy? You think I didn't want to march into that building and demand what was yours? Every night you came home exhausted from your 3 jobs. Every time you gave me your tips to help with rent. Every birthday with no presents. It broke me. Hannah sank into the chair across from her grandmother. The vinyl seat cracked, splitting a little more, like everything in their life. Then why? Because hatred would have poisoned you worse than poverty ever could. Dorothy reached across the table, took Hannah's hands in her arthritic ones. If you'd grown up knowing Charles Monroe stole your fortune, what would you have become? Bitter, angry, twisted by revenge. Your father saw what money did to people. He wanted you to know struggle, yes, but also strength. To value kindness over cash. That wasn't your choice to make. No, Dorothy agreed. It wasn't. But I made it anyway. Every day for 15 years. I chose to protect your soul over your bank account. And if you hate me for it, I'll understand. Hannah studied her grandmother's hands, swollen joints, paper-thin skin, nails worn down from decades of harsh cleaning chemicals. All those years of silence, carrying the weight of knowing they could have lived differently. James Patterson, Hannah said finally. He sent the documents. Dorothy nodded. 3 years ago, you were 18, about to age out of any legal recourse. I thought about burning them, but you deserved the truth, even if it came late. Across Manhattan, Charles Monroe sat in his car outside his Westchester mansion, unable to go inside. Through the window, he could see Rebecca in the living room, bald head covered with a silk scarf, reading on the couch. She was studying Monroe Financial's annual report, the fiction he'd written about his self-made success. His phone buzzed. Morrison. Emergency board meeting tomorrow, 8 a.m. Then Chen, recommending immediate audit of all accounts, 2010 present. Richardson. Media caught wind. Wall Street Journal calling for comment. 15 years of lies unraveling in 15 hours. He finally went inside. Rebecca looked up, smiled. Hey, Dad, how was the meeting? Fine. The word ash in his mouth. I was reading about the company's founding. She held up the report, his fabricated history. It's amazing how you built everything from nothing, just determination and genius. Each word was a nail in his coffin. Rebecca. I'm proud of you, Dad. When I get better, I want to work there. Continue the Monroe legacy. She coughed, covered her mouth. When she pulled her hand away, Charles saw blood. Your treatment. It's working, she lied brightly. Doctor says we just need to adjust the dosage. Charles excused himself, locked his home office door, and pulled out the real documents, the ones he'd hidden for 15 years. William's original partnership agreement, the trust fund transfers, the scholarship dissolution papers he'd signed, eliminating the fund that would have sent 500 kids to college by now. But there was one document he'd never filed, one act of conscience in an ocean of theft. Rebecca's medical bills, he'd been paying them from his personal accounts, not the company funds, draining his own savings, selling his stocks, even mortgaging the house. $4 million over 2 years, trying to save his daughter while drowning in the guilt of destroying another man's child. The next morning, Hannah sat across from James Patterson in a coffee shop near the courthouse. The lawyer had aged decades overnight. I documented everything, he said, sliding a flash drive across the table. Every transaction, every diverted fund, every charity William designated that Charles dissolved, the children's clinic that never got built, the after-school programs that closed, the scholarship recipients who never knew they'd been chosen. Hannah inserted the drive into her laptop, the screen filled with spreadsheets, contracts, bank records. This is 15 years of systematic theft, but also, James pulled up another file. This, medical bills, hundreds of them. All for Rebecca Monroe, all paid from Charles's personal accounts, not corporate funds. The amounts were staggering. He's broke, James said quietly. Personally broke. Everything he actually owns, not the company's assets, but his own, he's spent on Rebecca's treatment. The house is mortgaged 3 times over. His car's leased. The art collection was sold privately last year. But the treatments aren't working. James shook his head. She needs experimental therapy. Memorial Sloan Kettering has a program, but it's $8 million. Insurance won't cover it. Charles has been trying to arrange loans, but without company collateral, which he can't use now that you own it, no bank will touch him. Hannah stared at the screen. The man who'd stolen hundreds of millions was broke trying to save his daughter. The poetry of justice, except the one dying wasn't the criminal but an innocent girl. What are you going to do? James asked. I don't know. Dorothy was waiting at Prospect Cemetery when Hannah arrived. William's grave stood modest among flashier monuments, just his name, dates, and beloved husband and father. Sarah's stone beside it read, Dreamer and Mother. Your father came from nothing, Dorothy said, kneeling to clear leaves from the stones. His daddy was a drunk. His mama died young. He met Sarah at Columbia. She was the rich girl. He was there on scholarship. Her family hated him until they saw how he loved her. Why are you telling me this? Because William knew what it was like to be Charles. Desperate, hungry for success, willing to do anything to never be poor again. Dorothy stood, knees creaking. The difference was, William found love before he found money. Charles found money before he found meaning. He stole everything. Yes, and now his daughter's dying. Dorothy pulled out an old photograph, William and Charles, young, standing in front of their first office, a tiny space above a Chinese restaurant. Your father loved that man, even saw this coming, in a way. That's why he wrote you that letter. What letter? Dorothy handed her an envelope, sealed, with Hannah's name in William's handwriting. He gave me this the week before he died. Said to give it to you only if Charles failed his test. I think he knew Charles's weakness, hoped he was wrong, but prepared for the worst. Hannah opened it with trembling fingers. My dearest Hannah, if you're reading this, Charles has lost his way, but I need you to know he wasn't always lost. When we started this company, Charles worked 20-hour days. He believed in the dream as much as I did, maybe more, because he needed it more. Charles grew up hungry, not metaphorically, actually hungry, going to bed with an empty stomach, wearing shoes until his feet grew through them. That kind of poverty leaves scars that money can't heal. It makes you grab whatever you can and hold tight, terrified it'll disappear. I'm not excusing what he's done, but I'm asking you to understand it. And if you can understand it, maybe you can forgive it. The money isn't what matters. Hannah, it never was. What matters is what we do with whatever we have. Your mother taught me that. She could have lived on her family's fortune, but she chose to work at legal aid, helping people who couldn't afford justice. If Charles has taken what's yours, you have every right to take it back. But ask yourself, what would you build with it? And could you build something better with forgiveness than with fury? Be better than our mistakes. My daughter, be the person Charles and I both failed to be, someone who chooses love over law, mercy over money, healing over hatred. All my love, Dad. P.S. If Charles has a child, remember they're innocent. Whatever sins he's committed, don't let them inherit the punishment. Hannah folded the letter carefully. Across the cemetery, she saw a figure at another grave, newer, smaller. As she walked closer, she recognized the silk scarf, the thin shoulders. Rebecca Monroe knelt at a child's grave. Emma Monroe, 2019-2021. Hannah stopped. She hadn't known. None of the records mentioned another daughter. Rebecca heard footsteps, turned. Her face was wet with tears. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know anyone else came here this early. Your sister, Rebecca nodded. Leukemia, same as me. Dad couldn't save her. That's when he started. She stopped. I'm sorry. You don't need to hear this. It's okay. He sold everything to try to save Emma. His watch collection, his father's coins, everything with sentimental value. It wasn't enough. She died anyway. Now I'm sick. And he's destroying himself, trying to save me. I tell him to stop, that it's okay, but he won't listen. He says he failed Emma. He won't fail me. Hannah sat on the cold ground beside her. I'm Hannah. Rebecca. Are you visiting someone? My parents. Over there. They sat in silence. Two young women surrounded by stones and stories. Finally, Rebecca said, It's strange, isn't it, how grief makes us do things we never thought we would? My dad wasn't always... She paused, choosing words. He was different before Emma. Harder. More focused on success than family. Her illness changed him, made him realize what actually mattered. But by then, it was too late. It's never too late. Rebecca laughed, bitter. You haven't seen the medical bills. $8 million for a chance, just a chance at survival. Dad's tried everything, legal things. At least, he won't cross that line, not even for me. Hannah thought about the $300 million sitting in company assets. Money that was rightfully hers. Money that could save this girl's life 20 times over. Money built on her father's dream and Charles's betrayal. What if I told you there might be a way? Rebecca looked at her, hope flickering. Do you know someone? A charity or foundation? Something like that. Hannah stood, helped Rebecca to her feet. Can I ask you something? If your father had done something terrible, something unforgivable, would you still love him? Of course, he's my father. Love doesn't depend on perfection. Even if he'd hurt innocent people. Rebecca considered this. I'd want him to make it right, to apologize, to fix what he broke. But I'd still love him. Love and accountability aren't mutually exclusive. As they walked toward the cemetery exit, Hannah's phone buzzed. Morrison. Board meeting tomorrow. Your presence required to formalize ownership transfer. She looked back at her parents' graves, then at Rebecca's pale face, then at the photo in her pocket of William and Charles, young and hopeful. $300 million. A dying girl. A father's plea for forgiveness from beyond the grave. A grandmother's wisdom about the poverty of the soul versus the poverty of the wallet. Hannah made her decision. That afternoon, she found Charles in his office, not the corporate one, but his home study. He sat surrounded by papers, calculating impossible mathematics, how to turn nothing into $8 million, how to save his daughter with empty pockets. Mr. Monroe, he looked up, aged 10 years in 2 days. Come to gloat, come to talk, about Rebecca, about the money, about my father's dream. She sat across from him. I met your daughter today, at the cemetery. She was visiting Emma. Charles crumbled. The mention of his dead daughter broke whatever walls remained. I couldn't save her. All that money, all that power, and I couldn't save a 2-year-old girl. So you're trying to save Rebecca? With what? He laughed. Broken. I'm broke. Everything personal is gone, and the company money that's yours, as it should be. Hannah pulled out her father's letter, set it on the desk. Read this. Charles recognized William's handwriting. His hands shook as he read. By the end, tears streamed down his face. He knew what I was, what I'd do. He knew you were human, flawed, scared, desperate to never be hungry again. I was hungry anyway. Charles whispered. Just not for food. Hungry for power, success, respect. The kind of hungry that's never satisfied. Until Emma. He looked at the photo on his desk, both daughters. Before illness took one and threatened the other. I would give every penny to have them both healthy. Every penny I stole, every dollar I earned, everything. Hannah stood. Tomorrow's board meeting. Be there. We have a company to run. My father's name is still on the building. Brooks Monroe Financial. He wanted it to mean something: partnership, trust, shared success. You broke that trust. Now we rebuild it. Why would you? Because Rebecca needs treatment. Because 500 kids need scholarships. Because a children's clinic needs to be built. Because my father believed in second chances. And because Hannah moved to the door. Because poverty of the soul is worse than poverty of the wallet. My grandmother taught me that. You've been bankrupt in both. Tomorrow, we start rebuilding your spiritual credit. She left Charles Monroe sobbing at his desk, holding William's letter, surrounded by the wreckage of his choices and the possibility of redemption. That night, Hannah sat with Dorothy in their small kitchen. I'm going to save her. Rebecca, I'm going to use the money to save her. Dorothy nodded, unsurprised. Your father would be proud. I'm also going to rebuild everything Charles destroyed. The scholarships, the clinic, all of it. But I'm going to keep him as CEO. Why? Because he knows how to build. He built an empire on lies, but he built it. Now he can build something on truth, under supervision, with accountability. But build nonetheless. Dorothy smiled. You're William's daughter, but you're also your own woman. Better than both the men who came before. Outside, Brooklyn slept. Tomorrow, Manhattan would wake to a story of forgiveness that would baffle Wall Street. A girl who could have destroyed the man who stole everything, choosing instead to rebuild alongside him. The newspapers would call it weakness. Hannah called it strength. The math was simple. 300 million could destroy one man or save thousands. Charles Monroe, Rebecca Monroe, 500 scholarship kids, a children's clinic, after-school programs, and the radical idea that redemption was possible even for those who seemed irredeemable. Dorothy poured tea. Proper hot this time. Your mother would have done the same thing. You think? I know. Sarah believed in rehabilitation over revenge. That's why she worked legal aid instead of corporate law. She defended people who'd made mistakes, helped them rebuild. Hannah held the warm cup, steam rising like prayers. Tomorrow would begin the hardest chapter, working with the man who'd stolen her childhood to save his daughter's future. But tonight, she sat with her grandmother in their small kitchen, rich in ways Charles Monroe was only beginning to understand. The boardroom filled before 8 o'clock. Wall Street Journal reporters clustered outside, cameras ready. Bloomberg had a live feed running. The security team had tripled, not for violence, but for the sheer number of people trying to witness Charles Monroe's fall. Charles arrived at 7:45 carrying a manila envelope. His resignation letter, everyone assumed. He looked smaller somehow, his Armani suit hanging loose on shoulders that had carried stolen fortune for 15 years. His eyes were rimmed red, sleepless. He hadn't gone home after Hannah's visit. Instead, he'd sat in his office all night, reading and rereading William's letter. The board members were already seated. Morrison wouldn't meet his eyes. Chen studied documents with exaggerated focus. Villanueva whispered with Richardson about emergency protocols. Only James Patterson looked at Charles directly, something like pity in his weathered face. At exactly 8 o'clock, Hannah Brooks entered. She wore her mother's coat, navy wool, patched at the elbows, fraying at the cuffs. Beneath it, a simple black dress she'd bought at Goodwill 3 years ago for job interviews. Her shoes were the same scuffed flats that had squeaked across the marble lobby 2 days ago. But she walked like her father, steady, purposeful, unashamed. The reporters pressed against the glass doors, trying to capture every moment. The girl who could destroy an empire, dressed in thrift store clothes, about to claim her throne. Miss Brooks. Morrison stood, formal. As acting board chair. I call this emergency session to order. The matter before us is the transfer of ownership pursuant to the authenticated will of William Brooks. Hannah took a seat not at the head of the table, just a regular chair. Thank you, Mr. Morrison. But first, I believe Mr. Monroe has something to say. Charles stood slowly, pulling papers from his envelope. His hands shook. I've prepared. His voice cracked. He cleared his throat. Tried again. I've prepared a full confession. The room held its breath. 15 years ago, I stood at William and Sarah Brooks's gravesides and promised to protect their daughter. 3 months later, I filed fraudulent documents claiming no will existed. I liquidated the Brooks Family Trust $47 million and absorbed it into Monroe Financial under the pretense of managing it for Hannah's benefit. Cameras flashed through the glass. Someone was live streaming on their phone. I dissolved the Brooks Foundation, which would have provided full scholarships to 500 students by now. I canceled the children's clinic in Brooklyn that William had already broken ground on. I redirected every charity Sarah had designated, every program William had planned, into building this company. His voice grew stronger, as if confession was cutting away cancer. I told myself I was building something for Hannah to inherit, that I was growing her fortune. But that was a lie. I was building a monument to myself on the foundation of a dead man's dreams. Richardson interrupted. Charles, you should have a lawyer present. No. Charles turned to Hannah. She deserves to hear this without legal filters. He continued. I used William's business plans. He'd left notebooks full of strategies, innovations, market predictions. I presented them as my own genius. Every major success Monroe Financial achieved came from William Brooks's mind, funded by Brooks family money built on Brooks family legacy. The confession went on. Each charity dissolved. Each scholarship denied. Each promise broken. The room grew heavier with every word, until it seemed the glass walls might shatter from the weight of truth. Finally, Charles set down his papers. I've prepared my resignation, effective immediately. I've also prepared a full accounting of personal assets to begin restitution, though it will take several lifetimes to repay what I've stolen. He pushed the resignation letter toward Hannah. She didn't touch it. Instead, she pulled out her own envelope. Before you resign, Mr. Monroe, I'd like to read something. My father wrote this letter the week before he died. He gave it to my grandmother with instructions to give it to me only if you, his words, failed the test. She unfolded the aged paper. He wrote a separate letter to me, which I've already read. But this one was meant to be read here, in front of witnesses. If this moment ever came. Hannah's voice was steady as she read, to the board of Brooks Monroe Financial, and to Charles Theodore Monroe. If this letter is being read, it means Charles has given in to his deepest fear, the fear of being nobody, of being poor, of being forgotten. I don't blame him. I almost gave in to the same fear. Charles, do you remember that night in our first office? Above the Chinese restaurant, you were ready to quit. The venture capitalist had rejected us for the 10th time. You said, Will, guys like us don't make it. We're not born to it. And I said, that's exactly why we will make it. We know what it's like to have nothing. We'll never forget the people we're building this for. But you did forget, didn't you? The money made you forget. The power made you forget. Success became your drug, and like any addict, you did things you never imagined to get your fix. I knew this might happen. You think I didn't notice how you looked at the numbers, how you calculated what you could do with unlimited resources, how you resented that my wife's family money made our dream possible. That's why I structured the will the way I did. Not to punish you, but to test you, to see if you could choose loyalty over lucre, friendship over fortune. You failed that test, but here's what you didn't know. There's a second test. The second test belongs to Hannah. She can destroy you or restore you. She can choose vengeance or victory, not victory over you, but victory over the cycle of hurt that money creates. I'm betting on my daughter to be better than both of us. Charles, if Hannah offers you redemption, take it. Get on your knees if you have to. Because the man I knew, the man who worked 20-hour days not for money but for the mission, that man is still in there. That man can still build something worthy. And to the board, if Hannah chooses restoration over revenge, support her. It will seem insane. The lawyers will object. The media will mock. The shareholders will riot. But sometimes the insane choice is the only sane one. Build something better on the ashes of my trust. William Brooks. P.S. Charles. If you have children, remember they're watching. What you do next will echo in their lives forever. Charles collapsed into his chair, sobbing. Not the dignified tears of a CEO, but the broken weeping of a man seeing himself clearly for the first time. The board members looked away, uncomfortable with such naked emotion in a room built for calculated decisions. Hannah stood. Mr. Monroe, I don't accept your resignation. Every head snapped toward her. What? Morrison sputtered. I said I don't accept it. Monroe. Financial needs leadership. You built this company, yes, with stolen money and borrowed dreams. But you built it. You know every client, every contract, every opportunity. Destroying you would destroy thousands of jobs, millions in charity commitments we've made. And she looked directly at Charles. And it wouldn't save Rebecca. The scholarship fund, Chen started, will be reinstated immediately. The William Brooks and Charles Monroe Foundation for Forgotten Children. Hannah pulled out a folder. I spent last night drafting the charter. $5 million in immediate funding. $1 million annual commitment. Full scholarships for 100 students starting this fall. You want his name on it? Villanueva couldn't hide his shock. After what he did, especially after what he did, let every scholarship recipient know that people can change. That mistakes, even terrible ones, don't have to define us forever. Richardson, ever the CFO, raised the practical concern. The legal ramifications he's confessed to fraud, the SEC will investigate. Criminal charges. I'm not pressing charges, Hannah said simply. The state might prosecute regardless. They might. But I suspect they'll be more interested in restoration than prosecution if full restitution is being made. Hannah turned back to Charles. Which brings me to the terms of your continued employment. She pulled out another document. Your salary will be reduced to $100,000 annually, enough to live on, not enough for luxury. The remaining executive compensation, approximately $4 million per year, will go toward restitution. At that rate, it will take approximately 70 years to repay the principal of what you stole, not counting interest. I'll be dead before. Yes, you will. The debt will outlive you. Your legacy will be spending your entire remaining life repaying what you stole. But also, Hannah's voice softened, also rebuilding what you destroyed, also mentoring the scholarship recipients, also proving my father right that there was still good in you. Morrison cleared his throat. Miss Brooks, with respect, the shareholders will never accept. I own 67%. They'll accept what I decide. Steel in her voice now. Her father's daughter. But I'm not naive. Mr. Monroe will work under direct oversight. Every decision reviewed, every transaction monitored. James Patterson will serve as compliance officer, reporting directly to me. James nodded slowly. I can do that. Furthermore, Hannah continued, Rebecca Monroe's medical treatment will be covered by a separate medical foundation I'm establishing, not as payment to Charles, but because no child should die for their parents' sins. The foundation will also cover treatment for other children with leukemia who can't afford care. Charles looked up, eyes swollen. You'd save her after everything. I'm not saving her for you. I'm saving her for her. And for Emma. And for every parent who's had to watch a child die because they couldn't afford hope. The room fell silent. Outside, reporters pressed closer, trying to read lips, to understand why Charles Monroe wasn't being dragged out in handcuffs. Morrison voiced what everyone was thinking. This is insane. You're going to work with the man who stole your inheritance, who destroyed your father's legacy. No, Hannah said. I'm going to work with the man my father believed in, the one who existed before money corrupted him, the one who can exist again if given the chance. She looked around the table. My father wrote that we should build something better on the ashes of trust. Well, here we are in the ashes. Do we stay here, choking on the smoke of what was, or do we build? Chen spoke carefully. The media will crucify us. Heiress forgives fortune thief. We'll look weak. Or, Hannah countered, we'll look like a company that believes in redemption, that values restoration over revenge. That puts healing above hatred. In this political climate, that might be exactly what the world needs to see. She moved to the window, looking out at the city William and Charles had once dreamed of conquering together. My father and Mr. Monroe wanted to build something that mattered. They wanted Brooks Monroe Financial to stand for something beyond profit. It stood for betrayal for 15 years. Now it can stand for something else. What, Villanueva asked, proof that people can change, that forgiveness isn't weakness, that sometimes the best revenge is no revenge at all. She turned back to Charles. Mr. Monroe, I'm offering you a chance to earn the eulogy you want, to be remembered not as the man who stole from an orphan, but as the man who spent his life trying to repair the damage. To have Rebecca know her father as someone who faced his sins and worked to atone, not someone who ran from them. Charles stood on unsteady legs. Why? The word came out strangled. Why would you do this? Hannah pulled out the photo she'd been carrying William and Charles, young, hopeful, standing in front of their first office. Because my father loved you. Because he saw something in you worth saving. Because my mother believed in rehabilitation over punishment. And because... She paused, choosing her words. Because I've been poor my whole life. Mr. Monroe. But you've been poor in ways money can't touch. You've been bankrupt in your soul. I'm offering you a chance at a different kind of wealth. The boardroom doors opened. Rebecca Monroe walked in, supported by a nurse, pale and thin but determined. Dad, Charles rushed to her. You shouldn't be here. You should be resting. I saw the news. I had to come. She looked at Hannah. You're her. Aren't you the Brooks heir? The one my father wronged? Hannah nodded. Rebecca pulled free from her father, walked unsteadily to Hannah. Then, in front of everyone, she knelt. Please, don't destroy him. He's not perfect, but he's my father. He's all I have left. Hannah helped her stand. I'm not destroying anyone. We're building something. All of us. Together. Rebecca looked between Hannah and her father, confused. I don't understand. Your father is going to remain CEO, Hannah explained. He's going to rebuild everything he broke. And you're going to get the treatment you need. But why he stole from you? Yes. And now he's going to spend his life giving back. Not because a court ordered it, but because it's right. Because that's who he really is, under all the fear and greed. The man your Aunt Emma loved. The man you love. Rebecca began crying. Charles held her, his own tears falling into her silk scarf. Morrison looked around the table. All in favor of the proposed arrangement. One by one, hands rose. Even Richardson, the pragmatist, raised his hand. It's insane, he muttered. But maybe that's what we need. James Patterson stood. I'll draw up the formal agreements. Oversight protocols, restitution schedule, foundation charters, everything legal and transparent. Hannah nodded. Thank you. She picked up Charles's resignation letter, still lying on the table. Without reading it, she tore it in half. We have work to do. The first scholarship recipients need to be selected by spring. The clinic needs to break ground by summer, and Rebecca needs to start treatment immediately. Charles found his voice. Hannah, I don't deserve... No, she agreed. You don't. But my father believed in giving people more than they deserve. He called it grace. I'm choosing to continue his tradition. She walked to the door, paused. Oh, and Mr. Monroe, you'll be moving offices. The executive suite is excessive. You'll take a standard office on the 20th floor. The executive floor will be converted into a study space for scholarship recipients. They should see the city they're going to change. With that, Hannah Brooks left the boardroom. She didn't claim the CEO chair. She didn't demand the corner office. She simply walked out in her mother's patched coat, leaving behind a room full of powerful people trying to understand what they'd just witnessed. Outside, reporters swarmed. Miss Brooks, are you taking over Monroe? Financial is Charles Monroe being arrested. What happens to the stolen money? Hannah stopped, faced the cameras. Brooks Monroe Financial will honor its original mission-building opportunity for those who have none. Charles Monroe will remain as CEO under oversight, working to restore what was broken. The Brooks Foundation is being reestablished with full funding. And every child who was denied a scholarship, every family who lost services, will be made whole. You're forgiving him. A reporter sounded incredulous. After he stole hundreds of millions. I'm not forgiving him, Hannah corrected. Forgiveness is earned, not given. I'm offering him the opportunity to earn it. There's a difference. Why not just take everything and run? Hannah smiled, her father's smile. Because money isn't everything. My grandmother taught me that. She's been rich in all the ways that matter while having nothing in the bank. Charles Monroe has been poor in all the ways that matter while having everything in the bank. We're going to balance those scales. She pushed through the crowd, heading for the subway. A reporter shouted, Where are you going? Home. My grandmother is making soup. Real wealth is having someone who loves you waiting with a warm meal. As she descended into the station, she heard someone say, That girl just gave up hundreds of millions. No, she said to herself, thinking of Rebecca getting treatment, of children getting scholarships, of Charles learning to be human again. I just invested it better. The call came at 3 a.m., 5 days after the board meeting. Charles was in his new office, 20th floor, standard size. Boxes still unpacked when his phone rang. Memorial Sloan Kettering. Rebecca had collapsed during her treatment session. Internal bleeding. ICU. Come immediately. He drove through empty Manhattan streets, running red lights, praying to a God he'd stopped believing in when Emma died. The hospital garage knew his car by now. The security guards knew his face. The ICU nurses knew his terror. Rebecca lay unconscious, machines breathing for her. The silk scarf had fallen away, revealing her bare scalp, the bruises where IVs had blown veins, the gray pallor that meant the cancer was winning. Doctor Martinez stood at the foot of the bed, studying charts with the expression Charles had learned to fear, professional compassion masking futility. Mr. Monroe. What happened? The treatment caused a severe reaction. Her platelet count crashed. We've managed to stop the bleeding, but Martinez set down the chart. We need to discuss alternatives. Charles knew what that meant. They'd reached the end of conventional treatment. The experimental therapy, the CAR T-cell treatment you mentioned. It's $8 million. Insurance has formally denied coverage. They classify it as investigational. Without immediate payment guarantee. We can't... I'll get it. The words came out desperate, hollow. Charles had nothing left to sell, no credit left to tap. I'll find a way. Mr. Monroe, time is a factor. We'd need to begin the protocol within 72 hours to have any chance. Charles sank into the bedside chair, took Rebecca's cold hand. She'd painted her nails last week bright pink. To feel normal, she'd said. Now the polish was chipped, like everything else in their life. The door opened softly. Charles didn't look up, assuming it was another nurse. Then he heard the voice. "How is she?" Hannah Brooks stood in the doorway, still wearing her mother's coat despite the heated hospital. She carried a thermos and a folder. "What are you doing here?" "James Patterson called me. He's been monitoring Rebecca's treatment as part of the oversight agreement." Hannah moved to the other side of Rebecca's bed. "May I?" Charles nodded, too exhausted to question why his victim was visiting his dying daughter. Hannah sat, studied Rebecca's face. "She looks like her mother." "You didn't know Patricia?" "No, but I've seen photos." James showed me the file. "Beautiful woman. Rebecca has her bone structure." They sat in silence, watching machines push air into Rebecca's lungs. Finally, Charles spoke. "The treatment isn't working. There's an experimental option, but it's $8 million. I don't have it. I spent everything trying to save Emma, then everything else on Rebecca's treatment so far. I have nothing left to sell, no one left to borrow from." Hannah opened her folder, pulled out papers. "The Margaret Brooks Medical Foundation. I established it 3 days ago. Named after my maternal grandmother, she died of leukemia when my mother was 12. The foundation covers experimental treatment for children and young adults with blood cancers." Charles looked at the papers without comprehending. "What?" "Rebecca's treatment is approved. $8 million. Dr. Martinez already has the authorization. They can begin the CAR-T protocol tomorrow." The words didn't make sense. Charles stared at Hannah. This girl in her patched coat, offering to save his daughter's life. "But the board meeting. You said the medical foundation would help children who couldn't afford. Rebecca can't afford it. Neither can you. That qualifies." "That's not what you meant. You meant poor children, not the daughters of men who stole from orphans." Hannah's voice was steady. "Maybe, but poverty isn't just about money. Mr. Monroe, you've been poor in ways that would terrify most people who are broke. Poor in conscience, poor in peace, poor in the ability to save your children." Charles broke. Not the controlled tears of the boardroom, but complete collapse. 15 years of suppressed guilt, 2 daughters' worth of grief. The weight of every terrible choice crashed down at once. He sobbed so hard he couldn't breathe, clutching Rebecca's hand like it was the only thing keeping him from drowning. "Emma?" he choked out. "I couldn't save Emma. She died in this same room. This exact room. Bed 3. I held her while she—" He couldn't finish. Hannah moved around the bed, knelt beside his chair. "Tell me about Emma." "She was so small, 2 years old. She loved butterflies, called them flutterbys. The cancer came so fast. 6 weeks from diagnosis to—" He gestured helplessly at the machines. "I sold everything. My father's watch, the only thing he left me. My mother's ring, the first dollar we ever earned at Brooks Monroe, framed in my office. None of it mattered. She died anyway. And you went insane with grief." Charles looked at her through swollen eyes. "That's when I really started stealing. After Emma died. Before, I'd just been managing the money, telling myself I was growing it for you. But after Emma, I needed to control something, to have enough power that death couldn't touch my family again. I stole more aggressively, invested more recklessly, built faster and higher and bigger, trying to outrun the fact that money can't stop death." Rebecca stirred slightly, mumbled something incoherent. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "Hannah," she whispered. "Sister." Hannah took her other hand. "I'm here. I dreamed you were my sister, that we grew up together, that Dad didn't—" Rebecca's eyes closed again, falling back into drugged sleep. Charles looked between them, his daughter and the girl who should have been like a daughter, if he'd kept his promise to William. Why are you doing this, really? Hannah stood, walked to the window. Dawn was breaking over the East River. My mother died in this hospital. Different floor, same disease, acute myeloid leukemia. My father spent every penny trying to save her, not just the family fortune, but borrowed against future earnings. Sold their wedding rings, everything. She died anyway. I didn't know. How could you? You were too busy stealing what was left to notice how it was lost. There was no venom in her voice, just fact. My father understood what you're feeling right now. The helplessness. The rage at a universe where money can't buy what matters most. The temptation to grab whatever you can to never feel powerless again. But he didn't steal. No. He had my grandmother. Dorothy kept him grounded. Reminded him that my mother wouldn't want him to become bitter. You had no one after Patricia left. Charles flinched. His ex-wife, Rebecca's mother, had left when the lies became too obvious to ignore. She'd died 2 years later in a car accident, never having forgiven him. Dr. Martinez entered. Mr. Monroe, Ms. Brooks, we've received the payment authorization. We can begin Rebecca's treatment this afternoon. I need to be clear, this isn't a guarantee. SAR-T therapy has a 60% success rate in cases like Rebecca's. There are risks, but it's her best chance. Do it, Charles said immediately. Martinez nodded, left to prepare. Charles turned to Hannah. I want to resign. This is too much. I can't take your charity after what I've done. I can't face you every day knowing running away is what got you here. Hannah's voice turned sharp. You ran from your poverty into greed. You ran from your grief into theft. You ran from your conscience into lies. No more running. I can't. You can and you will. You'll show up every day. You'll rebuild the foundation. You'll mentor the scholarship kids. You'll face the people you hurt and work to heal them. That's the deal. That's the price of Rebecca's treatment, not money, but commitment. You stay and earn the forgiveness. It would be easier if you just destroyed me. Yes, Hannah agreed. It would be easier for both of us. You could wallow in self-pity. I could enjoy revenge. But easy isn't what my father would want. He'd want what's hard: redemption. She pulled something from her bag. Another old photograph. This one showed 2 boys, maybe 10 years old, in ragged clothes, standing in front of a tenement building. James found this in the archives. That's you and my father, isn't it? When you were kids in the Bronx? Charles took the photo with trembling hands. 2 skinny boys, all bones and hope. Jackson Avenue, the projects. We lived 3 apartments apart. Shared everything: food when one family had it and the other didn't. Clothes when we outgrew them. Dreams when reality got too hard. Tell me, Hannah said softly. Tell me what my father never told me. Tell me who Charles Monroe was before he became what he is. Charles traced the faces in the photograph. My father died when I was 8. Lung cancer from asbestos exposure at the factory. No life insurance. Just debt. My mother cleaned houses, like your grandmother would later do. Never enough money. I went to bed hungry more nights than not. Wore shoes until my feet came through. Stayed home from school when we couldn't afford lunch because I was too proud to take the free meal ticket. He looked at Rebecca, pale and fragile in the hospital bed. William's family wasn't much better off, but they had each other. His parents loved each other, loved him. My mother was too broken by grief and poverty to love anything. She drank herself to death when I was 16. And my father saved me. Let me sleep on his floor. Made sure I graduated high school. Got us both into city college. He had this light in him, this belief that we could be more than our circumstances. I followed that light. And then, Charles's voice broke. Then I snuffed it out. I took the light that saved me, and I buried it under all my fears. The money triggered something in you. Every survival instinct I'd developed as a hungry kid. Hoard everything. Trust no one. Take what you can because it might disappear. The $47 million in your trust, it was more money than I could comprehend. I told myself I was protecting it. growing it, managing it, but I was stealing it. Every day for 15 years, I stole from the only real friend I ever had. Rebecca's monitors beeped, her heart rate increasing. She was waking up again. This time, her eyes focused. "Dad, is that?" "Hannah." "I'm here," Hannah said, taking her hand again. "You're going to start new treatment today. You're going to get better." "Why?" Rebecca looked between them, confused. "Dad said we couldn't afford—" "It's handled," Charles said quickly. But Rebecca was smart, even through the medication fog. "She's paying for it. The girl you stole from is paying for my treatment." "Yes," Hannah said simply. "Why?" "Because you're not your father. Because sins shouldn't be inherited. Because I know what it's like to lose a mother to leukemia. And because—" Hannah squeezed her hand. "Because you called me sister. In your delirium. You called me sister. Maybe that's what we should have been. If our father's story had gone differently." Rebecca started crying. "I don't understand any of this." "You don't have to. Just focus on getting better, on fighting, on living." Dr. Martinez returned with a team. "We need to prep Rebecca for the procedure." Charles stood to leave, but Rebecca grabbed his hand. "Dad, whatever you did, fix it. I don't care about money or success or any of it. Just fix what you broke. Be the man Mom thought she married. Be the man Emma believed you were." As they wheeled Rebecca away, Charles stood frozen. Hannah touched his shoulder. "Come on. You have work to do." "Work?" "The first scholarship interviews are tomorrow. You're going to sit on the panel. You're going to look into the eyes of kids from backgrounds like yours and decide who gets the chance you and my father got. You're going to remember what hope looks like when it hasn't been corrupted by fear." They walked out of the ICU together. An unlikely pair, the billionaire thief in his wrinkled suit and the heir in her patched coat. As they waited for the elevator, Charles said, "Your father would be proud of you." "Would he?" Hannah sounded uncertain for the first time. "Or would he think I'm being foolish?" "He'd think you're being exactly who he raised you to be. Even though he wasn't there to raise you, you're his heart walking around in the world, finishing what he started." The elevator arrived. As they descended, Charles said, "I grew up hungry. That kind of hungry that lives in your bones. I've been running from it my whole life." "I know," Hannah said. "But here's what you never learned: being full of the wrong things leaves you hungrier than being empty." James Patterson stood in the empty boardroom at midnight, 7 days after the meeting that changed everything. He'd asked Hannah and Charles to come alone. No lawyers, no witnesses. The old lawyer's hands trembled as he unlocked a safe that hadn't been opened in 15 years. "There's something else," he said when they arrived. "Something I found only yesterday, buried in William's personal effects. I've been going through everything for the formal transfer, and I found this." He pulled out another envelope, sealed with the same red wax as the will, but marked, "To be opened only if Charles Monroe fails to claim his legitimate share within 1 year of my death." Charles froze. Legitimate share. James broke the seal with the care of an archaeologist opening a tomb. Inside, another document in William's handwriting, witnessed and notarized. "This is a codicil to the will. A secret provision." He began reading, "If Charles Monroe serves as faithful executor of my estate for 1 year without taking unauthorized compensation, he is to receive 40% of Brooks Monroe Financial, free and clear, as my business partner and friend. This is separate from the trust fund, separate from Hannah's inheritance. This is his by right of our partnership, our friendship, and our shared dream." The paper slipped from Charles's numb fingers. 40%. He was going to give me 40%. Legally, legitimately. All you had to do was wait 12 months. James's voice was heavy with the weight of pointless tragedy. "But you took it all within 3 months." Charles sank into a chair, the mathematics of his impatience crushing him. 40% of the company would be worth over $100 million today. Legal money, clean money. Money that would have come with blessing instead of curse. He knew I'd be tempted, Charles whispered. He set up a test, but also a reward. And I failed so fast I never even knew the reward existed. Hannah stood at the window, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. He knew you better than you knew yourself. There's more, James said quietly. He pulled out a police report. This was sealed in juvenile records, but William had a copy. Charles, age 12, arrested for stealing food from a grocery store. William, also 12, took equal blame even though he wasn't there. Both got community service. William served Charles's hours when Charles's mother was too drunk to drive him. Charles covered his face. Every kindness William had shown him, every grace he'd extended, all repaid with betrayal. Why are you showing us this? Hannah asked. Because you need to understand the full picture before... James stopped, looked at Hannah with concern. How is Dorothy? Hannah stiffened. She's fine. Hannah, James's voice was gentle. I know about the cancer. I saw her at Mount Sinai last week, oncology ward. The truth cracked Hannah's composure like ice breaking on a river. She sank into a chair, suddenly looking younger than her 21 years. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer, diagnosed 6 months ago. She didn't tell me until last week. Charles looked up, shocked. That's why the food stamps. The 3 jobs you were paying for her treatment. Medicare covers some. I've been covering the rest, selling plasma twice a week. That's the legal limit. Hannah rolled up her sleeve, showing the permanent bruising in the crook of her elbow. $50 each time, $2,600 a year, plus my 3 jobs, minus rent, minus food, minus her medications. You've been killing yourself to keep her alive while I spent $4,000 on suits. The apartment's gone, Hannah continued, voice flat. We got evicted 3 weeks ago when I couldn't make rent. I've been sleeping in my car. Dorothy's been staying with a friend from church, but that ends tomorrow. I was going to ask for an advance on the restitution payments, but... Where's your car? Charles interrupted. Repossessed yesterday. Missed too many payments. Charles stood abruptly. We're leaving. Now, James, can you... I'll handle the paperwork. James was already pulling out his phone. Dorothy Brooks, Mount Sinai. Within an hour, Charles had arranged a suite at Mount Sinai's private wing for Dorothy. Best oncologists in the city. Experimental treatments. Everything covered by what he called executive medical benefits, but what was actually the last of his personal credit. Dorothy was awake when they arrived, despite the late hour. She looked smaller than Hannah remembered from just yesterday, as if the cancer was eating her from inside out. But her eyes were sharp, clear. Charles Monroe, she said when he entered. You look older than your photos. Mrs. Brooks, save it. I'm too tired and too close to dead for apologies. She turned to Hannah. You told him. James told him. Dorothy nodded. Pride's a stupid reason to die, but I've been poor too long to know any other way. She studied Charles. You know what the hardest part was? Not the hunger, not the cold, not even watching Hannah work herself to death. It was knowing I could end it all with one phone call, one lawsuit, one newspaper story. Why didn't you? Because William asked me to raise Hannah to choose love over law, to be better than the circumstances that made her. Every night she came home exhausted. Every morning she left before dawn. Every time she gave me her last dollar I wanted to break, to tell her everything, to let her hate you because hate would have been easier than hope. But you didn't. No, I kept my promise. Raised her to believe the best in people even when they showed her the worst. Taught her that dignity doesn't come from what you have, but from what you do with whatever that is. Dorothy coughed, specks of blood on her handkerchief. I'm dying, Mr. Monroe. 2 months, maybe 3. I need to know Hannah will be okay. She owns everything. She'll never want for anything. I'm not talking about money. Dorothy's eyes blazed with the last of her strength. I'm talking about her soul. She's choosing to work with you, to forgive you, to rebuild with you, That's going to cost her more than poverty ever did. I need to know you understand that. I need to know you'll protect her heart the way you should have protected her inheritance." Before Charles could respond, his phone rang. Rebecca's number. "Dad," her voice was stronger than it had been in months. "Are you watching the news?" Charles found the remote, turned on the room's television. CNN was running a segment, "The Heiress Who Chose Forgiveness." Rebecca was on screen, interviewed from her hospital bed. "My father stole everything from Hannah Brooks," Rebecca said to the camera. "He betrayed his best friend, robbed an orphan, and built an empire on lies, and those are facts. But here's another fact Hannah Brooks is paying for my cancer treatment. $8 million to save the daughter of the man who stole hundreds of millions from her." The interviewer asked, "How does that make you feel?" "Ashamed, grateful, confused. But mostly, it makes me want to be better. My father failed his test. He chose fear over friendship, greed over grace. But Hannah's showing us there's another way. She's showing us that you can acknowledge harm without perpetuating it, that you can demand justice without demanding destruction." "What would you say to your father?" Rebecca looked directly at the camera. "Dad, I know you're watching. I know everything now. The stolen money, the broken promises, all of it. And I need you to know something. I don't hate you. I'm disappointed. I'm hurt. But I don't hate you. Hannah showed me who you could be, who you were before the money poisoned you. Be that man. Not for me, not for her, but for the memory of William Brooks. Be the man your best friend believed you could be." Charles turned off the television, tears streaming down his face. Hannah stood by the window, unchanged, unmoved. "There's something else," Dorothy said into the silence. "Something Hannah hasn't told anyone. About the accident that killed William and Sarah." Hannah's composure finally shattered. "Grandma, don't... He needs to know." Dorothy struggled to sit up. "The drunk driver who killed them, his name was Marcus Thompson. William had hired him at the company. Entry-level position. Second chance after prison. William was mentoring him, helping him stay sober. He'd been clean for 2 years. Charles remembered Marcus. Quiet man, worked in accounting, always early, always grateful. The night of the accident," Dorothy continued, "Marcus had relapsed. His daughter had died of leukemia." She looked meaningfully at Charles. "Sound familiar?" "He got drunk for the first time in 2 years. Got in his car, ran a red light. William and Sarah died instantly." "What happened to Marcus?" Charles asked. Though he suspected he knew. "William lived for about 10 minutes after the crash, long enough for Marcus to crawl to the car, sobbing, apologizing. You know what William's last words were? 'I forgive you. Take care of yourself. Don't let this destroy you.'" Hannah was crying now, silent tears that she didn't bother to wipe away. "Marcus sent letters for years. Apologies. Updates on his sobriety. He's been clean since that night. Runs an AA group now. Helps other people who've made unforgivable mistakes try to forgive themselves. You've been in contact with him. He sends a check every month. $50. All he can afford. Blood money, he calls it. Money that can't buy forgiveness but needs to be paid anyway. I donate it to Mothers Against Drunk Driving in my parents' names." Charles understood now, the full weight of what Hannah was doing. She was forgiving him while living with the forgiveness her father gave to the man who killed him. She was choosing grace not from naivety, but from the deepest understanding of what grace cost. "One more thing," Dorothy said, her voice fading. "The coat. Tell him about the coat." Hannah touched the navy wool she never removed. "It's not vintage. It's not a memorial. It's literally all I have. When we got evicted, I could only take what I could carry. This coat, the clothes underneath it, and the documents about my inheritance. Everything else is in storage that I can't afford to access. You've been wearing the same clothes for 3 weeks. I wash them at the laundromat when I can, or in hospital bathrooms when I can't afford the laundromat." She said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity. "While you and the board discussed hundreds of millions, I was calculating if I had enough quarters for the dryer. Charles stood, removed his suit jacket, tried to put it around Hannah's shoulders. She stepped away. No, I don't want your clothes or your pity. I want you to understand what poverty really is. It's not just lacking money. It's the exhaustion of constant calculation. It's the shame of wearing the same thing every day. It's the fear that someone will smell the car you slept in on your clothes. It's choosing between your grandmother's medicine and your own food, and choosing medicine every time. I'm sorry. I don't want apologies either. I want you to remember this when you're interviewing scholarship candidates. When you see a kid in the same clothes every day, when you smell poverty on them, when you see them calculating whether they can afford to accept an opportunity, remember that could have been your daughter, should have been your daughter. If I was the kind of person you are. Dorothy raised a trembling hand. Enough. I'm dying and I want to die in peace. Charles Monroe, you're going to take care of my granddaughter. Not financially, she can handle that herself, but you're going to make sure she doesn't let this grace destroy her, because that's the danger of forgiveness. It can eat you alive from the inside if you're not careful. How? By earning it. Every day. By being worth the second chance she's giving you. By rebuilding not just what you stole, but what you could have built if you'd been better from the start. Dorothy lay back, exhausted. Now get out, both of you. I need to sleep, and you need to prepare for tomorrow. What's tomorrow? Charles asked. The scholarship interviews. Hannah said. 500 applicants, 50 spots. You're going to help choose who gets the chance our fathers got. As they left the hospital, Charles said, the driver who killed your parents, Marcus, you forgave him. My father forgave him with his last breath. Who am I to hold a grudge? He released. Hannah pulled the patched coat tighter. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, doesn't mean trusting, doesn't mean the consequences disappear. Marcus lives with what he did every day. He'll die with it, just like you'll live and die with what you did. The forgiveness is for the forgiver, not the forgiven. It's so we don't have to carry the poison of hatred. Rebecca was right. You're showing us another way. No, Hannah corrected. I'm showing you my father's way. The way he lived and died. The way that believes people can be better than their worst moment. The question is, will you prove him right? 1 year later, the Beacon Theater blazed with light as 100 families filed in for the first annual Brooks Monroe Foundation Scholarship Ceremony. Outside, October wind rattled the same streets where Hannah had once walked in desperation. Inside, those who had nothing were about to receive everything. Charles Monroe stood backstage in a simple gray suit from JCPenney, $69 on sale. His monthly budget was strict $2,000 for basic expenses, everything else to restitution. He'd moved from Westchester to a studio apartment in Queens, sold the Mercedes, took the subway. He looked older, grayer, but somehow younger too, as if confession had peeled away years of pretense. Rebecca stood beside him, her hair grown back in soft curls, cheeks pink with health. The CAR-T therapy had worked full remission, monthly monitoring, but alive and vibrant in ways that made every sacrifice worthwhile. She ran the Foundation's youth program now, mentoring teenagers who'd aged out of foster care. You ready, Dad? Charles watched Hannah through the stage curtain, greeting families, remembering every name, every story. She still wore her mother's coat. I'll never be ready, but I'll do it anyway. They walked on stage together. The applause was polite, uncertain. Everyone knew the story now, the theft, the forgiveness, the rebuilding. Some saw redemption. Others saw a criminal who'd escaped justice. Charles accepted both views as truth. My name is Charles Monroe, he began. No microphone flourish, no CEO posturing. 15 years ago, I stole from a child. I built this company on that theft. I stand here not as a success story, but as a cautionary tale. The audience shifted, uncomfortable with such naked honesty. But I also stand here as proof that people can change, that second chances, when truly earned, can create something beautiful from something broken. He looked at the scholarship recipients, kids from Brooklyn, The Bronx. Queens his people. William's people. Each of you represents what William Brooks believed, that poverty is not destiny, that hunger can create either desperation or determination, and that education is the ladder out of whatever hole life dropped you in. Hannah took the microphone. My father and Mr. Monroe grew up 3 apartments apart in the Bronx projects. They shared everything: food, clothes, dreams. That partnership was broken by fear and greed. Today, we rebuild it through you. She called each recipient by name: Maria Gonzalez, first in her family to attend college; Deshaun Williams, who'd been sleeping in shelters while maintaining a 4.0 GPA; Amy Chen, whose parents worked 3 jobs each to keep their family afloat. 100 stories of struggle transformed into hope. Dorothy Brooks sat in the front row, wheelchair-bound but alive against every medical prediction. The experimental treatment Charles had arranged gave her another year, maybe 2. She wore a new dress, the first in decades, and smiled as her granddaughter worked the stage like William once had, with grace and gravity. After the ceremony, Hannah made an announcement that stunned everyone, including Charles. I'll be joining you all at City College this fall, not as a benefactor, but as a fellow student. I'll live in the dorms, work in the cafeteria, study in the library. We'll struggle together, succeed together, become what our fathers dreamed together. Later, in the quiet afternoon, Charles found Hannah at Greenwood Cemetery, standing between William and Sarah's graves. He placed fresh flowers every week for a year now, never missing once. Your father forgave me before I betrayed him, Charles said. That's the worst part. He knew what I was capable of and loved me anyway. That's not forgiveness, Hannah corrected. That's faith. He had faith you could be better. It just took you 15 years to prove him right. Dorothy called them to her apartment that evening, a new place. Small, but clean, overlooking Prospect Park. Rebecca was already there, aproned and laughing as Dorothy taught her to make chicken soup. The secret, Dorothy said, hands guiding Rebecca's as they stirred, isn't the ingredients. It's the time, the patience, the love you stir into it. Hannah joined them. 3 generations of women who should have been family from the start. Charles watched from the doorway, understanding finally that wealth wasn't money or power, but this people who knew your worst and chose to love you anyway. Charles, stop lurking and peel potatoes, Dorothy commanded. Redemption doesn't mean you get to stand around looking tragic. They cooked together until evening fell. Dorothy told stories of young William, his dreams bigger than his circumstances. Rebecca shared memories of Emma, the sister she'd lost. Hannah spoke of the families they'd helped, the children who'd have chances now. When dinner was served, Charles noticed Hannah had finally taken off her mother's coat, hanging it carefully by the door. But when reporters arrived for a follow-up story, she put it back on. Why? Charles asked. You could buy 100 coats now. This coat is my history, Hannah said. It reminds me where I came from, what I survived, what my parents sacrificed. When scholarship kids see me wearing it, they know I understand that success doesn't require abandoning your past, but carrying it forward with dignity. The foundation's motto, carved in marble at the entrance of the renamed Brooks Monroe building, caught the last light of day. Wealth isn't what you have, it's what you give. Charles Monroe had spent 15 years learning that lesson. He'd spend whatever years remained teaching it to others. One scholarship, one apology, one act of restitution at a time. Dorothy Brooks, dying but not dead, victorious in her promise to William, watched the sun set over Brooklyn with her granddaughter's hand in hers and smiled. You know what haunts me most about Hannah's story? It's not the millions stolen or the years of poverty. It's that moment when Rebecca, delirious with fever, called Hannah sister. Because that's what they should have been all along, family, if greed hadn't poisoned the well. I keep thinking about Dorothy, scrubbing Charles Monroe's floors while knowing he'd stolen her granddaughter's fortune. She chose silence not from weakness, but from a terrible strength, the decision to protect Hannah's heart over her bank account. Every night for 15 years, she chose gratitude for what they had over bitterness for what was taken. and Charles. He learned too late that family isn't just blood, it's the promises we keep, the trust we honor, the people who knew us when we had nothing. William was his true brother, and he betrayed that bond for paper that couldn't buy back Emma's life or purchase peace for his soul. But here's what breaks me open. Hannah understood that real wealth is Dorothy's arthritic hands making soup, Rebecca calling her sister, even Charles finally remembering who he was before money made him monstrous. Family blood, chosen, or forged through forgiveness, that's the only fortune that compounds infinitely, the only inheritance that matters when the last dollar is counted.